Cohen, town manager here in the town of Chelmsford, and I want to thank all of you who have taken time out of your busy schedule at this time of the year to come out for tonight's meeting regarding the redevelopment of the town center parcel, more commonly known as the Oddfellows parcel, and the Fiske House, Santander Bank, and so forth. We also want to welcome those who are joining us on Chelmsford Telemedia for this really important meeting. For years, and we've often looked at the condition in the center at the intersection in terms of what will happen there, what can be done there. Many board members, boards of selectmen that I worked for over the years, it's sort of like, what can be done? And for a long time, it was sort of a wait. And the reason for that was because of the lease situation that was involved with the parties, Santander Bank and others. But we knew this day would arrive, and the day is upon us. The current lease arrangements for the whole parcel in the center there And really tonight is sort of what we call the sort of public discussion and sort of commencement of the process, which will result through a significant period through the Planning Board, Historic District Commission, Conservation Commission, Center Village Master Plan Committee, Board of Selectmen input, Historic District Commission, as I mentioned, Historical Commission, and obviously basically most entities in the community in terms of the redevelopment of really the core piece in the town center. And many of you who, obviously I see so many familiar faces, both present and past, involved with those boards and committees, as well as many who have a vested interest in the town. We've seen some activity in recent years in the center, and obviously this is a key critical component of that. Certainly, as you know, they're finishing up the construction of the units at the old lumber yard, I guess we describe it, next to the rail trail, behind Brickhouse Pizza. The grist mill project is nearing completion. I understand occupancy will be beginning in the next several weeks of the first units in that development. And even throughout the center, even before that, we saw the CVS construction, certainly the redesign and redevelopment of the Purity Plaza, which now hosts ventures such as Andiamo's, Nobo, and so forth. And we're even seeing some activity now at 9 Acton Road, which will be coming before the Planning Board later this month. So clearly, it's really, I think, sort of an unprecedented period and probably a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the community in terms of what's transpiring, in terms of shaping the future vision of the town center. And so we were asked, we meaning myself, Evan Belansky, Lisa Maroney, sort of who are the principals in the town offices who sort of field the inquiries along with our land use boards, as well as the other professionals such as our fire chief, building commissioner, and others. We were asked to sort of host an event this evening to sort of begin the dialogue with the community, hear the vision by those who have invested time and resources into what may be before us in the community. And so again, I want to, on behalf of so many, I want to welcome you, and again, welcome those who are watching this evening. And now I want to turn the microphone over to Evan Belansky, our Community Development Director, who will sort of give a little bit of perspective on how we got to this point in terms of the community planning process.
Great, thank you, and good evening. There are handouts for all the presentations for this evening up at the table up front here. So as Paul mentioned, I just want to provide a brief kind of high-level overview as to what the town has been up to, dating back approximately 20 years ago. The slide in front of you is an image from 1998. That is the first master planning image from a dedicated committee for the village. And what's interesting to note on this was it primarily highlighted the Brookwalk vision, but if you look closely, it also identifies future development opportunities in a narrative format, not in not in a drawing format. So the next slide highlights kind of an itemized list of action items, accomplishments, initiatives, programs over the last 20 years since 1998. I'm not going to go through them individually, but from approximately 1998 to 2010, there was a significant period of capital investment, both from the town, federal government, and state government. And those capital improvements revolved around transportation improvement projects, underground and utility projects, roadway projects, signalization, things of that nature. From 2011 to 2013, the town commenced planning and zoning efforts, essentially to implement the recommendations of the 2010 master plan. Many members that are in the audience were heavily involved in those efforts, particularly the 2010 master plan and the 2013 Center Village master plan. So I want to give credit to those former and past members. From about 2016 to present is essentially a period of implementation, highlighted by the Grist Mill approval in 2016. Town meeting appropriated additional funds for wayfinding implementation. We've received a Mass Works grant leveraging private investment in the center to continue the brick sidewalks and streetscape improvements. And most recently, in 2018, received a state earmark for $200,000 to fabricate wayfinding signage and furniture. So next slide is several images from the 2013 Village Master Plan. The one on the left is a handout available this evening. It's essentially a comprehensive map identifying some of the key themes and visions related to the brick walk, parking, public parking options, as well as some walking trails and walking loops. The image on the right provides some detail related to the three sections of the envisioned brick walk. The first from the left is the forest path. That's essentially what is encompassed in the under construction Grist Mill. The hardscape is essentially the area that traverses Central Square itself over the roadway and into the Santander parking lot area. And then the final portion is what's referred to as a wetland path, which is located within the kind of natural wetland area behind Summer Street and ultimately connects up to Summer Place on Summer Street. So next image are some potential visions related to the brick walk concept. This is located within the hardscaped area. Again, these are intended to be used for imagination and planning and visioning purposes, kind of a, what-if scenarios or what could potentially be built there for purposes of a brick walk. As I mentioned, this is within the existing hardscape area, primarily along the Santander rear parking area. So more recently, as I mentioned, the 32 units at Grist Mill, excuse me, currently under construction. We understand that most, if not all, have been sold, and initial occupancy is commencing within the next month or so. As part of that project, they will be implementing the forest walk portion of the brick walk. I had also mentioned the Mass Works grant that will be commencing construction in spring construction season of 2020. As part of that project, the town has on the books continuation of the brick sidewalks from Cushing Place around the corner up to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. That's the kind of the last piece of which brick sidewalks have not been installed. As part of that streetscape improvement, we envision the wayfinding signage and street furniture to also be installed. In order to implement the Brickwalk vision at next week's Fall Town Meeting, a $60,000 request for Phase 1 Brickwalk feasibility study will be voted on. That will be an opportunity for the town to appoint a dedicated committee working with a variety of stakeholders, including the Land Trust, the Conservation Commission, members of the Center Village Master Planning Committee, and several at-large members, one of which may be a resident of the grist mill. And finally, as the town manager mentioned, there's also a proposed multifamily project located at 9 Acton Road, which is currently in front of the planning board for consideration. So final slide, just to summarize very high level here. Over the last 20 years of continued commitment by the town, also effective zoning overlays adopted by town meeting, and the fortunate circumstances of having a good market has led to the opportunity to create a vision which could include a three-legged stool for multifamily residential development along with the implementation of the Brickwalk vision. So that was kind of the high-level context to provide some context for this meeting. At this point, I'd like to hand it over to the development team who can speak in more detail about their proposal.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Katie Enright, and I'm a civil engineer with Howard Stein Hudson. My office is here in Chelmsford on Turnpike Road. I'm here tonight with a presentation that's kind of a culmination of the last 4 years, so I'm going to try to not be too wordy as I discuss the project, because this is a new project that's before you tonight. Just a brief history. The project, as Evan and Paul stated, is well known as the Oddfellows and Fiske property. Santander has also been there, and there's also a large parking lot at the back. The property is known as 1 Billerica Road and 41 through 44 Central Square, and is about 3.5 acres. So you see the three properties on both Billerica Road and Central Square, but the property does go back fairly significantly. Since the year 2000, the project or the property has been owned by a company out of California. I know a lot of people have heard that and have questioned kind of why it's been kind of left in limbo for the last 20 years. And Ben Swanson is here tonight from AmeriCal if you have any questions regarding that. But AmeriCal Property Management has leased the property to several different banks over the last 20 years, and the banks actually controlled the entire property within their leasehold. So not only did they lease for the purpose of having the bank, but they actually had the right to do things within both Oddfellows and Fiske and the parking lot. So the entire property was held by the bank. Since I met Ben 4 years ago, he's been negotiating with Santander. It has taken that long to come to an agreement. The agreement was just signed this summer. The agreement will, in the middle of next summer, remove Santander's lease from the entire property and keep it to the area around the existing structure and some of the parking around the existing structure. Therefore, finally, after 20 years, opening the rest of the property up for reuse and redevelopment by the current owner. Once that lease negotiation finally went through, Ben and his team in California realized it didn't really make sense doing this from California. And they talked to both Fred Faust and myself about potential developers that would be interested, that both were well respected in the town of Chelmsford, had a history within the town of Chelmsford, and just had an overall good reputation for development and could get something done at this parcel. So we went through many different interviews, and finally we were able to select a development team to work with us to redevelop this property. Unfortunately, it's not one person, which would have been very, very clean to have one entire development done by one person. It actually ended up being 2 different developers. And this summer, they were able to sign a purchase and sale with AmeriCal. And the two developers that are here with us tonight are Stonegate Construction Corporation, which is Jay Finnegan and Eric Cates, who you all, I'm sure, are very familiar with. Jay has been developing in and around Chelmsford and lived in Chelmsford for many, many years. And Human Baini and Ali Zoshaf, say the last name. I gotta get it. Zoshar Afate? All right, I was pretty close. You all know Ali because he owns and runs Fishbones Restaurant. So we've got two fantastic developers at the table. Jay and Eric are going to be responsible for the Fiske House and a multifamily project, which would happen, or we're proposing, within the parking lot. And Ali and Human would be responsible for the Oddfellows reuse and rehabilitation. You're all here tonight because this is an insanely complicated project. We're going to touch just about everyone in this town as far as needing a permit. We need to go to the Planning Board, Historic District Commission, Historical Commission, Conservation Commission, and certainly also will be at Center Village Implementation Committee and the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee to have conversations. There's going to be a lot of conversations in the next 6 to 10 months to get this done. We did do a preliminary meeting with Historic District Commission in the past couple of weeks, and that was to just kind of discuss some of our preliminary architecture and start that process moving down the road. So there's a significant amount of permitting that's going to need to be done tonight, not tonight, but over the next year with all of these different boards and commissions. And in no way is the plan you see tonight fully engineered. This is a conceptual plan at this stage, and we will do our best to answer any and all questions tonight, but we have a long way to go with engineering before this project can be approved. As Evan said, the project that is here before you tonight is really a culmination of the Center Village Overlay District. So the Center Village Overlay District was created to create, it's really Chelmsford's only mixed-use district. It's there to create a combination of commercial and retail developments within the center of town, and then add a multifamily component. So certainly people, pedestrian-friendly connections, wayfinding, all the things you've heard both Evan and Paul say tonight was in the town's vision when this was created. There was also a study for housing in the village, and we discussed this a little bit during the gristmill approval, but your housing plan essentially, or your housing study, basically said that there's a significant lack of multifamily housing in the center village, and that the center village is capable, or should be, to basically capture 166 to 250 new residential units in the center village district. What these would be created for, according to the study, is really kind of more of your 55 and older residents. So people looking for one-story living, garage, and good pedestrian amenities, local retail, local restaurants, local services. And most people in that study really wanted to see a condo or a townhome and want all of these amenities. So that's part of the project that we're also going to be showing you tonight. This is the site on GIS. Let's see if it'll let me. So this is the site here. It encompasses Oddfellows, the Fiske House. This is Santander. This is a small building between the Fiske House and Santander. This is the large parking lot at the back. This is Beaver Brook. You can see Cushing. This goes up to Gristmill right here. This is Andiamo, Fishbones, and 6 Boston Road right here. So you can see the development site, or the site itself, is quite large. It's certainly more than the 3 buildings you see at the front. Again, this is the aerial image, so you can see Fishbones. You can see the Fishbones parking lot here. This is the large parking area here, Santander, Fiske, and Oddfellows. And this is right the entrance to Cushing right here. So you can see the development parcel goes all the way back. This is the parking lot. This is CVS, and the parking lot next to CVS. So it goes significantly far off the roads in both directions. This is the conceptual plan that we've developed. Part of it's been developed over the last 4 years, and part of it has been tweaked for the developers that have been brought to the table for this development. What we're looking at doing is, right now, I can't say whether or not we can definitely save Oddfellows, but I can tell you that Ali and Human are desperately trying to. We have both a structural engineering team and an architect in place that's going to be reviewing the feasibility of that. That is their goal, is to save that building and move forward with it. That's this building. Let's see if it'll go here. The Fiske House, which will be developed by Eric and Jay, again, is planned to be rehabilitated. And that, we believe, is structurally sound and able to be rehabilitated. What they're looking at right now is updating it for ADA accessibility, parking, et cetera. And I'm going to get more into this. This is Santander here, and this would be the new multifamily building in the back parking lot of the site. I'm going to show that again, but just to kind of show you a development summary, the Fiske House is 3 floors, just under 6,000 square feet gross, so it's a pretty small structure. Oddfellows is about 11,700 square feet. Santander is about 4,600 square feet, and the multifamily building at the back would be about 60,000 square feet. So where are we going to park these people is the next development summary, and it basically talks about the zoning analysis based on the amount of office space, the amount of restaurant, the amount of retail, the amount of multifamily that we're proposing within this site. The Fiske House, we're looking at that as being a pure office space, so we're looking at that for a number of spaces. Oddfellows, we're looking at doing a 100-seat restaurant on the first floor and 8 to 10 residential units on the second and third floors above that. And the multifamily building at the back is 32 two-bedroom units, so that would require also an additional amount of spaces. And then the Santander lease itself, in the lease it requires 14 spaces, which is more than would be required by zoning, but that's what they require to operate moving forward. So you can see we're just about in the range of where we're supposed to be. We're actually just 2 under at this point with proposed parking within that lot. Oddfellows certainly has a long history. I've read the account on the Historical Commission and District Commission's website. It's had many, many uses. Certainly, Ali and Human have looked at the past uses, and I think you'll find that typically you're seeing a business on the first floor. Certainly, the second floor was at Oddfellows Hall at one point and could handle up to 300 people in that building. But was then eventually turned over to apartments and was the Colonial Apartment. So they're looking at creating that again, that first floor commercial usage, and that second and third floor apartment usage. I'm going to have Ali come up and talk a little bit about his experience, but what I want to show you here is some work that certainly you're familiar with and stuff that Human has done on his own as far as restoring historical structures. But in front of you is Fishbones, which many of you are very familiar with. It's a fantastic business in the center of your town. And also 6 Boston Road, which is also owned by Ali. So if you could come up and just say a few words.
Good evening. My name is Ali Zosharafatan, which I own and operate Fishbones Restaurant, and my partner in this venture is Human Bayani of Belmont, Massachusetts. We actually went to high school together in Boston. Mr. Bayani owns a real estate company, and he has rehabilitated a number of single multifamilies in Greater Boston and Cape Cod areas. I believe there's some pictures up there of his work. In addition to Fishbones Restaurant, I own the historic building at 6 Boston Road in Central Square. It's fully tenanted, and we have 11 professional businesses in there. And we are very excited, actually, hopefully we can save Oddfellows building and kind of bring it back to its glorious days. So that's pretty much what I have. Thank you.
Certainly, the project team has been through Oddfellows. Just to kind of comment on some of the things that we've seen to date, certainly there's been significant water damage in the building. There's mold, there's settlement. But we have a really good team of professionals looking at it. And as I said, the intent is to really try to save that building. and make it come to life again. The other building that is a big piece of this history and this project is the Fiske House at the corner of Central Square and Billerica Road. There's some imagery here. This building is in the National Register, but as you can see, I think it was back in 1978, there was a pretty significant fire at this building, and it has since been rebuilt. I can remember people having offices in it, so it was in the last 20 years that this building was used, when DeShane and Farrell used to be in this building, but it's currently empty. The building is in pretty rough shape, but I believe it's mostly cosmetic, and Jay and Eric are looking to renovate this building so that it, again, can come back to life as office space or professional space. But there's some fairly significant things that would need to be done to upgrade this building. One of the biggest is ADA access, and we've looked at a couple of different options for this building for ADA access, and also parking in proximity to the building. So we've also done a review of that, but we'd like to maintain as much of the structure as possible. And we'll certainly be in front of the Historic District Commission with any renovations here, and any demolition will be in front of the Historical Commission for as we move forward. This is the biggest part of the project, which is obviously the new piece. This is the back parking lot, and this is actually exactly where the building would sit. So the building starts right about here and goes into this back parking lot area. So this is what currently exists there today. This was during the day, I believe, last Friday. This is an area of where the brook walk would be extended. So outside on the edge of Beaver Brook, which is in these trees here. Essentially, we're operating, same as Grist Mill, we're operating within the limits of the existing project that's there today. So we're not looking at getting any closer to Beaver Brook or any closer to the wetlands than the existing project that's there today. We also would look to design the drainage system to accommodate the new stormwater management standards, and would also be looking to move a sewer line as part of this project. So you can see this is the area where the brook walk would continue from across the street. This is the view shed from Billerica Road, so you can see all of those trees would remain, and the building is actually set pretty significantly low in the ground from the center. It's about 7.5 feet lower than the Oddfellows building, so essentially you're losing a complete floor of that rear building from the street to the rear of the site. And that will have to all remain the grade because we are in floodplain as you get to the back of this site and along the side of the brook. This is the proposed building. This is our starting point. We did have a conversation, and we're in process with making some changes to the proposed building. This is a little bit different than the Historic District Commission saw it. We were working on something for this evening. This is essentially the grist mill today. This side of the brook, or this side of the center, is within the Historic District, so we did start conversations with the Historic District Commission to talk about how we can change this building to better fit within the Historic District. But you can see that this first floor on this building, different than the grist mill, is within the floodplain. So the garage, this is actually the garage. The garage would be exposed. And then there's 4 floors of living above it. It's the same unit count as the grist mill. It's 32 units. So essentially what you're seeing is a very similar, this view shed, somewhat similar to the grist mill. The only view shed you're really going to see on this building, as you look quickly between Oddfellows and Fiske, would be the end of the structure here. The rest of the building would really be invisible to the businesses within the center of town. And again, we're working through this process, really starting today. Back to the site plan, you can see the parking lot itself has been completely re-looked at and reformed. The existing edge of pavement actually goes a little bit closer to the brook than some of the things that we have located here, but what we used, the existing pavement and the existing building structures that are there to kind of enclose the development. So the building is set all the way at the back. We're more than 250 feet from Central Square, and we're about 225 feet from Billerica Road, and you can see the sight line here is extremely limited. This is where all the trees are behind the professional office building on Billerica Road. So really, the only place you're going to get to see that sideline is if you're all the way at the very back parking space next in the Fishbones parking lot, will you get to see the side of this building. You'll capture it very briefly if you turn your head right as you go through Central Square. And again, all of the parking for this building is contained under the building, and then in front of the building here, the restaurant parking is contained, and the apartment parking is contained in this area. The Santander parking is contained right around Santander, and we've created new parking along this entrance drive along the Fiske House to allow for closer proximity parking to the Fiske House. That is our presentation for tonight. As I said, this is a conceptual plan. We have a lot of work to do. We asked for this meeting because we didn't want to hit one board first and start the process. We wanted all of you to see it at once, so that the information that's given to all of you at the same time. Certainly we'll be making appointments with each and every one of you as we move forward with this from now until, I believe, my project summary goes through, or my project timeline goes through the end of next June. And essentially, construction couldn't start out here until July 1 of next year anyway. So certainly we're here tonight. Eric Cates is here from Stonegate Construction. Ali is here, who you heard from. Ben is here from AmeriCal. Fred Faust has been working with us since day one on this project also, and would be happy to answer any initial questions that you might have.
Katie, David McLaughlin. I have 3 questions. In the last 35 years, at one time, there was a $5 million state grant for Central Square. I didn't see that on your list. Is that gone, or is that still available?
So that was an earmark from a couple years ago. It has never been appropriated by the governor's office. Quite frankly, I'm not sure there was any justifiable reason for the governor to authorize any of that money. However, what we are contemplating is that if the town does have a compelling reason to reach out to the governor's office associated with the implementation of the Center Village vision, then we will do so. While the earmark was $5 million, I'm not sure we see all $5 million being released. But we certainly believe that an appropriate scope and scale would be a reasonable and justifiable request on behalf of the town.
2 other questions, if I might. In the original master plan that long time ago, was there a plan to have a bridge from the Andiamo parking lot into the back of here? And is that still envisioned, or is that no longer envisioned?
Yes, so what we've shown here, and actually this is it, kind of in the corner, it's evolved over time. So I think if you saw the original plan that was hand-drawn that Evan put up there, at one point that was meant to be a vehicular connection. That's kind of evolved over time to a pedestrian connection. And during the approval process of the Andiamo, the Plaza, Chelmsford Town Center, there was mention of it in the decision, right, that an easement would be left for this at some point. So we're showing a proposed location of it. We would bring the walk to here, and then certainly we'd work with the town in the approvals and trying to find funding essentially to build the bridge. It's a pretty significant bridge.
And one last question. Is there any public parking left on that site?
There is not.
Let me touch upon a couple things. One is on the public parking. Right now, and basically for the last generation, the town has had a license agreement with the property owner, basically for municipal parking at that site, with a 30-day termination notice. And we, obviously that will expire at June 30th, 2020. And as noted, obviously parking is a concern in the center. Going back to your question about the bridge and sort of the comment about the state grant funding, the bond authorization process, in this case, the environmental bond authorization process is, like most state bond authorization, they authorize more than what is ever funded by the legislature. And so what happens is they sort of turn it over to the governor, in which how to allocate the limited funding that's available under the state's bonding authorization and appropriations. What we envision is, given the level of private investment in this site, the fact that this meets many of the state's goals in terms of additional housing, in terms of center transit-oriented development, i.e. there's bus routes that go past the site, the LRTA goes past the site, it's located in the center next to a rail trail. We believe that would put us in a position to approach the administration at the State House and speak to the governor's staff and say, we wish to leverage, the private investment with public investment of the portions of the bond authorization. As Evan said, we don't envision all $5 million would get released, but we do believe that we could approach them for state investment, and perhaps some of the items, as was mentioned, would be for the pedestrian crossing across the brook and other amenities and improvements in the center. So that's sort of how it all ties together, we believe.
So as you're pondering questions, anything on Katie's presentation or my presentation, questions, comments, we're happy to take any of those.
I take it that the dark green is floodplain?
The dark green are the existing trees to remain. That's the
Right,
tree line
but the
that's there today.
floodplain is back there, is that correct?
The floodplain, right, runs basically here and then nips a little bit of this.
So part of the building will be in floodplain?
Correct. The garage will.
So as people continue to ponder questions, I'll just speak a little bit about process moving forward from here. So as Katie mentioned, the team has already commenced engagement with the Historic District Commission. Katie had also mentioned that there'll be many meetings over the next 8 to 10 months. Some of those meetings will likely be a part of formal public hearings. Depending on how the 4 regulatory boards and the development team wish to proceed, we may convene a similar multi-board meeting such as this to open that official public hearing. We'll have to figure this one out. As Katie mentioned, this is much more complicated than a similar multi-board meeting we did several years ago related to the the Lowell General Hospital up in Drum Hill. So we'll have to figure that out as we go. Jurisdiction, as Katie alluded to, under zoning is entirely with the planning board, likely including the floodplain. Conservation Commission will obviously have their riverfront and floodplain jurisdiction. District Commission has jurisdiction over any modification to any existing structure, as well as new construction, which is visible from a public way. And the Historical Commission has jurisdiction if there is any demolition or partial demolition of any of the existing structures. Continue to look for comments, questions, how we got here, any of the kind of miscellaneous pieces of the puzzle that we've talked about. No. Just one moment. Someone behind you.
I got the mic. So Jim Lane, I live on Old Westford Road here in Chelmsford. I was the chairman of the Center Village Master Plan Committee from its inception in 2012 until 2013, and then as well as the Center Village Master Plan Implementation Committee thereafter until early 2018. So I know this plan very well. I do want to just bring up a few things that weren't mentioned. During the whole process, the public input, the subject matter expertise, all of the board solicitation, one of the main things that was key and really the genesis around this plan was destination. Make Chelmsford Center a destination. And Ali, I'm glad, I am so happy that you are putting, your mark on this and you want to put a restaurant in, because Fishbones is truly a destination. I mean, people come from all over to go there. So I can only imagine what you're going to create there, and I think that's going to be a destination as well, which will be good for the downtown. The other thing was around bringing back vibrancy, bringing the life of Center Village back. And what better way to do that than actually getting people to come and live in the Center Village? So the second thing that we heard, and it started with the Fine Point Associate study, but then catapulted into the main plan, which was there was definitely a want, a need, and a desire for empty nesters, people, that had raised their children. They probably had a house here in Chelmsford and wanted to stay in Chelmsford, and the downtown area suited their needs because it had access to restaurants, it had access to doctors and dentists, it had access to the bike trail, and it also had access to the arts center that was had been rehabbed and has been doing very well. So I think, the residential aspect to you, Eric, and Jay, I commend you on that. I think it's going to be fantastic. I will not comment on the design or architecture because we have plenty of boards that are going to really hit hard on that. But I would just add that the last thing that was really something that was, in just about every meeting we had was about connectivity. Connectivity was the rising theme throughout the entire downtown, and the biggest complaint was that the pieces didn't connect. You couldn't easily access, Brick House Restaurant over to, Stop and Shop or CVS. And what this Brook Walk does is it brings connectivity. So as you're going through your design, conceptually and then to fruition, I strongly urge you to, really read the plan and look at the design there. There was a lot of hours spent on it. There was a lot of input that was given to it. It was approved by 3 different boards here in town, the Planning Board, Conservation Commission, and the Board of Selectmen as part of the approval process, and then on to town meeting for their approval. So there were a lot of folks that weighed in on it, and there were a lot of hours spent researching the connectivity piece of it. So the pedestrian bridges that you see in the architectural renderings that bring you over to the back of Fishbones, all that was done with the reason of connectivity, and then all the way up to the bike trail, around to Bartlett Woods, Bartlett Park, to the library, over to the Adiamos and Choice Fitness and CVS, and then all the way out to Summer Street. So the back of this development, there's actually another piece that's not being shown here that would connect. It's a wetlands footpath that would lead all the way out to Summer Street, where the senior assisted living is today, which would bring connectivity to those neighborhoods into the downtown area without having to drive or without having to walk in some unsafe areas, throughout the center with all the traffic and stuff like that. So I just wanted to bring those points up, and something tells me I'll be active throughout this process.
So I think there was a question down here, but as the mic is making its way down, just to follow up on some of Jim's comments, 2 items that will likely be seeking some kind of additional input from the boards and developer. One is, obviously, this portion of the Brook Walk is identified as a hardscape within the master plan. I think primarily because it was envisioned to be located on existing pavement that directly abuts up to the brook that's canaled. Obviously, what's being proposed initially is to, I think, mirror kind of a forest trail similar to what Grist Mill has under construction. So that'll be one item that I think the boards and committees working with the developer will need to figure out what's the best approach, understanding some of the environmental trade-offs. Second item, I think, was mentioned in the master plan, a smaller pedestrian bridge connection between the new proposed restaurant and the existing Fishbones restaurant. I think where many of us are hopeful that can also be incorporated and likely fairly easy since ownership is it will be common in this situation.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in the matter of connectivity, which was mentioned before, and wanted to poke at a couple of details. I hope they're not too deep. First of all, this is denominated as a walk. Would that walk be open to, say, bicycle traffic, or would it be strictly pedestrian? I'm wondering what people are thinking.
Yep. So the precedent has been somewhat set with Gristmill. Gristmill, via the planning board decision, was essentially designed and approved as a pedestrian.
Strictly pedestrian, yeah.
Not strictly, but primarily as pedestrian walking. I think there's an integral component with Gristmill where they have an interior bike storage. So I don't think bicyclists were prohibited,
Okay.
but I'm not sure that it was designed to facilitate active bicycling. I think it was more envisioned that you would walk your bike through the forest trail.
Okay, but you know, given that this connects to the Freeman Rail Trail, it's something to consider.
Yeah, just to add, the gristmill will also be within a public easement. The easement documents haven't been drawn up yet,
Right.
but that's the intent, and the same would be here. So the intent would be that this would be within a public easement for everyone to use.
Okay, and my second question is, I mean, I'm assuming you're able to save the Oddfellows building. I'd be very disappointed if that can't be made to happen, though I realize there's some work to be done. But there's that corner of the Oddfellows building that's really an add-on, and it goes right up to the edge. I noticed your diagram here really does not show the path going right up to the street. It kind of stops there, and I'm wondering if it's going to be possible and what it's going to take to get that path to go right up to Route 4.
Right, so the way we have it designed currently is that it would come in and connect with an interior network and would go by a patio seating area and back into the center and connect in. As Ali is reviewing the space for his restaurant, that would be the first to go if he doesn't need it.
Yeah, right.
is essentially what we're looking at. If he needs it to make this the 100-seat restaurant that he would like to see it, then it would stay. If he doesn't, that would be the first
Okay.
piece on the chopping block.
All right. Well, that was my interest.
All right.
No further questions, comments? Okay, so at this point, my expectation will be that the developer will continue to engage with the district commission, and then at some point, hopefully sooner than later, engage with the planning board, would likely be the next board up.
Yeah, no, certainly the next, where this is in the Center Village Overlay District, and we would require, this project would require us to work through that process, we will need to come before the planning board for an applicability. So the plans themselves would be developed slightly further, but before going into too much engineering and design, we would come before the planning board and make sure that the planning board supported the notion of this project before jumping into the next phase of design. So again, we are looking forward to going back before the Historic District Commission, and then most likely we'll be making application to the planning board for applicability before moving forward with design plans. Anybody else?
Well, thank you very much for attending. Look forward to working with all the boards.